It's frustrating when you're passionate about something and you see the pains that they're going through, and you know that these bigger companies sometimes have the right solution too, and then they just buy the business, right?
The Digital Banking Podcast is powered by Typhon. Typhon is the creator of Infinia, a dramatically better digital banking platform for community financial institutions, as well as several platform-agnostic, revenue-generating point solutions. Our highly configurable platform and broad ecosystem of third-party partners ensure our entire suite is scalable and extensible to meet the needs of any FI. On our podcast, you will hear host Josh DeTar discuss today's most pressing financial technology topics with seasoned industry experts from every possible discipline.
You know, your podcast hasn't officially made it until there's ads in it. But this is one you're not going to want to skip past. And, well, if you do, feel free to hit that fast forward 15 seconds button twice. Ever wonder what gives me my energy and enthusiasm during these podcasts? You know, outside of my relentless desire to learn about, connect, share, and build up community FIs and their mission to support the communities they serve? It's coffee, and lots of it. Now, you want to know what's better than your regular old coffee? How about donating $5 to the Children's Miracle Network hospitals through Credit Unions for Kids every time you purchase high-quality, ethically sourced coffee that also provides living wages to coffee farmers? So if you want to listen to this episode with epic levels of caffeine-induced focus and help kids in need, head to javaforkids.org to learn more and buy a bag or 10. Thanks.
Welcome to another episode of the Digital Banking Podcast. My guest today is Scott Fieber, the Chief Strategy Officer for Cook Solutions Group. Look, I had the pleasure of meeting Scott, almost a decade ago now at this point. Look, I'm sure you find amazing people in other industries too, maybe like healthcare to name one. But the community FI space is home to so many truly wonderful people. And I personally put Scott in that group. It's not because he's a nice guy, because he made an intro to an FI for me or anything like that. It's because his foundation is rooted in so much more. His foundation is focused on serving in his church, serving in his community, serving in his nonprofit he and his wife started. Now, Scott will also be the first one to tell you, look, we all got to work. Making money is a necessary. We need to put food on the table for our families. But if I'm going to have to work, I want to do something that aligns to my core value of service. And it's why bringing value to community FIs is in such direct alignment to him. Community FIs are built to serve. Now, Scott is also one of those total characters, though, too. And how he accomplishes his goals of service and adds value to our industry makes me chuckle sometimes. If you've ever met him at a conference, you probably know what I'm talking about. He's usually pretty easy to spot in either a gold sequin jacket, some crazy hat, or like guns shooting money out. What I appreciate, though, is it's all genuine. It's not a gimmick to get personal attention. It's not rooted in some deep insecurity or desire to land a sale. It's because he cares so much about creating deep connections with people to learn how to serve and support them that he really wants to go above and beyond in everything he does. Scott and his wife have been married for 15 years. He has 3 amazing kids. And he says everything he does in his work and professional life is to set a good example for them and to build a world where he's happy for them to grow up in. Now, you might think with an intro like this, we're just going to talk about a bunch of kumbaya fluff and stuff. But Scott's also kind of my go-to SME for all things security and more. He really does have his finger on the pulse of what's impacting community FIs right now. And he's got some really solid tips and trips to be thinking about to create real solutions. So trust me, there will be some gold advice in that jacket of his by the end of this. Actually, I was starting to think about it, Scott. I'm a little disappointed in you, man. Like, am I not good enough to get the gold jacket? Like,
It's right here.
Oh, it's behind you
It's
the whole
there.
time. I
But
didn't even know.
yeah, it's been on the wall actually for the longest time, but then the flags took precedence. I need to shake things up. But no, you know what? That gold jacket has been a blessing and a curse. Like, we wore it for one thing and it kind of took on its own life. And then now I have to put my pride aside and just keep wearing it because everywhere I go, people are like, hey, where's the jacket? I'm like, yeah, I got it here.
Well, it was.
I went to lunch and one didn't have it, and I got strung up for it, so I got to wear it now.
We were in San Diego late last year. And I
That's
remember
right.
we were texting back and forth like, hey, where are you? I don't know. Where are you? And then literally I look across, and I'm not even kidding. Scott's got to be a solid 75 yards from me in this giant convention hall. And I see the gold jacket. And so I just sent him a picture of like zoomed in 5X, and all you could see was the jacket. And I was like, oh, no, I found you. So it works.
Yep. Being like, hey, someone's spying on me. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it works, I guess. Yeah, for whatever that is, it works. Yeah. So
I know,
it's
isn't
fun.
it funny? Like we become the things that you get known for, right? It's like,
Mhm.
I get the same thing. I even get at this point, Scott, if I fly through PDX and I'm not wearing my red Chucks, I'll have TSA even be like, where's your red Chucks? I'm like, are you
That's
kidding?
funny.
Like, can I not take a personal flight every once in a while? Like,
No, you are
oh,
Typhoon. You have
I
to live
am,
and breathe
I
everywhere
have
you
my
go.
red Chucks. Like,
Oh.
but at least your jacket, like mine gets buried down below, right? Like at least yours is higher up. And I had somebody tell me I have to start wearing my shoes on my head. It'd be easier to spot.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because the jacket came about because we were doing a game show at one of our tech summits, and that was my game show jacket. It was literally a $20 purchase on Amazon. That's all it was. It's like, I got to find me a game show jacket. Boom, that's it. That's all the thought that came into it. And then it just snowballed into this thing of now I have to wear it everywhere I go. It's
Is
like,
it still the same one you got? Like, has it lasted that long?
no, actually, funny story. So that was the year we were doing tech summits at different Topgolfs. So we went to like LA, then Phoenix, then Salt Lake, then somewhere else. Anyways, like by the sixth one, it had become a thing, right? So even the Topgolf employees were like, look for the guy wearing the gold jacket. That's your customer. That's where you got to, he'll work with you on all this stuff. And so the last one, it was in Scottsdale, and one of the employees had Down syndrome, and he was like excited to see me, this guy in the gold jacket. So he greeted us with a couple other workers from Topgolf. And I was like, hey, it's at the end of it was our last show of the tour. And so I told the kid, I'm like, hey, you know what? You can have my jacket if you want. He's like, oh, really? And so I gave the jacket to him. And it was even cooler too, because we were giving away, it's right when we launched our conveyance application. And so I said, hey, tell you what, if you can hit this bullseye, everyone here can get like a discount off of conveyance. And he walked up, full confidence, gold jacket and all, and just threw a dart. And like everyone won. Like it was the craziest thing. And then anyways, he left, and then you could see him working because he was just there greeting people, just giving people pictures and hugging everyone in his new gold jacket. So that's when I thought the gold jacket was gone. And then sure enough, I had to like go back and to another show and be like, well, where's your gold jacket? So I had to buy a second one. So this is actually number 2, but number 1
That's
somewhere
awesome.
in Scottsdale at a Topgolf. If you end up going there, he might be wearing it still. I don't know.
I had for like full transparency, I had no idea I was setting you up for that mic drop when I asked the question.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't validate when I introduced Scott as a guest. I don't know what does. But no, I think, and that's funny. Like that leads me to, even when Scott and I were just getting ready to start this podcast today before we hit record, we kind of made the joke that it's like, we've got so much history at this point and so many like different, like Scott seems to be the guy I go to, like when I want to get on a soapbox and I just want to like rant about something, because he's usually got an equally or more impressive rant about something else or similar or the exact same thing. And so we were joking that like this podcast could totally turn into just Scott and I going on these epic, like personal and professional rants and our different soapboxes. And we would be absolute, like we would have a blast and we could go on for hours, and you all might actually find it somewhat entertaining too and find some value in it. But then we're like, there's actually some other like real good stuff that we can talk about. But, I wanted to kind of start with the thing that I feel like always comes up. Right. And like the soapbox we seem to always get on. And I think why you and I are kind of the, I guess, personalities are in our industry and like why we talk a lot about the things in the way we do is community financial institutions have really been hampered in their ability to innovate in tech. And it has come from, unfortunately, some of the vendor space and kind of rewarding people for bad behavior and almost getting boxed into not being able to take advantage of things that are happening so much faster outside of our industry. And, this is not a conversation of just, David versus Goliath and trying to talk about why, small companies may be better than others. I don't even think it has anything to do with size necessarily. We know some really great companies in our industry that are really big, right? And some really small companies that are not doing the right things. But, working with vendors that want to enable an ecosystem of fast-paced innovation and kind of leveraging what you have to very quickly make advancements is something that you seem to get on a soapbox about a lot.
Yeah, to your point, it's like, it's frustrating when you're passionate about something and you see the pains that they're going through, and that these bigger companies sometimes have the right solution too, and then they just buy the business, right? Or like, hey, like they're so frustrated with, like, here's a good example, I guess, right? You sit down in a meeting and they go on a rant, like their own personal soapbox about how much they hate or dislike this company. And they see, they're like, we're re-upping for another 3 years. It's like, why? Like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? But to be honest, like, they either don't have an option, like they're so ingrained with it, they have to, or it's just like, it takes a lot of guts too, I guess, to, like, in some cases, peel some pieces off and actually prove. And in some cases, it may just it comes down to money. Like you get so many discounts by doing so much with some of these bigger companies. You have to, I don't know. But to me, it's just like, if I could wave one magic wand and fix that, like, I do feel like it is at the very end of the world, like the crux of the lack of innovation is because of these massive companies that are holding everyone hostage. Like if that wasn't there, I truly do feel like, especially in the banking industry, innovation would be way further down the road than it is today. That's just my personal opinion, but
I mean, you almost have validation in that point, in that you look at some of the newer fintech entrants into financial services, right? And how much faster they're to move, because they're quite simply not tied into some of that legacy tech, right? Or to your point, like some of those legacy contracts or just legacy complexity. One of the things I was thinking about, you even mentioned this before we started recording, right? Like you were talking about how Starbucks has become a massive depository because of how much money people keep loaded in their Starbucks. And it made me think back to, I had a good buddy, Mr. Danny Payne from Jack Henry, on the podcast probably about a year ago or so. And one of the things that Danny was talking about was, he said he loved to go to conferences and ask people, like, how many financial services apps do you have on your phone? And he was like, I usually get an answer of, like, I can't remember exactly what he said, like 3 to 5 or something, right? And he goes, and then I would ask them if they'd be willing to go through their phone with me, and I'll tell you which ones actually have financial services plugged into them. And he's like, that number quickly skyrockets to like 20 or 30, right? One of the big examples was like Starbucks and having you load money into it. And so to some degree, when we're talking about the challenges that community financial institutions are facing, we go through deposit challenges, right? Where we're looking for deposits. And if we've got, say we're a 100,000 member credit union and we have 100,000 members all have $10 in their Starbucks app, that's $1 million, right? That's $1 million that's not deposited into our financial institution, that's just sitting in Starbucks. So
and take it a step
that's
further,
kind of like
too,
a long-winded way of getting to, like, what you were saying is, not only do you have some of these challenges, we have a whole new entrant of like neobanks and fintechs that are coming in fresh. Also, like, we're getting beat up on all sides in terms of, quote, offering innovation and ways for people to use their money in even things like Starbucks. And whoever would have thought, I mean, when Starbucks first started as a coffee company in Seattle, would you have thought, like, they're going to come for my deposits? That one was not on my bingo card, dude. I don't know about yours.
Thing with Amazon starting out as this book company that now is what it is too. Like, it's funny, like, how these companies, take shape over years of innovation. But again, like, they're never satisfied. I think that's the difference, right? I think some of these other ones they're just satisfied with when they have a valuable, like, a real competitor, they just buy them up and then remove the competition by just buying it, right? Which is, again, that's stopping innovation right in its tracks, unfortunately. I'm with you. I'm starting to count. I'm looking at my phone now too, like, wondering how many apps I've got that have banking tied to it. It's probably too many.
Right. Well, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about just some of the challenges, partnering with companies where maybe the best interest of the financial institution there. And you think about, you get the types of companies servicing the community FIs that care about earnings per share over customer satisfaction and value. And then at the same time, if you kind of use that same example of like, who are they beholden to? Who do they care about? Right. For them, it's their shareholders.
Right.
Or for whatever. Maybe it's a, publicly held company and they just care about, padding their owners' pockets, whatever it is. Right. The focus is not the customer at the point. And then you even look at, okay, let's talk about Starbucks and Amazon and Venmo and all of these folks that are now providing financial services. Again, where is their allegiance? It's not to you, the person who has the Starbucks app. I mean, it is to some degree because they want more of your money as a customer. But
Sure.
Again, they're kind of beholden to their shareholders, right? That neobank is focused on customer acquisition, right? And profit per customer. And that's not a community financial institution. Like, that's not a credit. It's like, that's not woven into their DNA. They care about serving their members and improving their financial lives. And what I find really interesting is in our space, when it's like, I want to do business with companies, think like big banks and how they operate, but I want my customers to do business with me because of the service and the relationship.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, you go meet with I would say pretty much any community FI, the number one answer when you ask them what separates them from everyone else is they're going to say service. Right. And it's just like, okay, if that's the answer, right? And I totally agree with it, by the way. Like, I think there's other things that they should differentiate themselves with too, beyond that. But if you feel like that's your core value, you should be asking, or shouldn't you be asking the same thing from your vendor partners? Like, if they're not also tied into service, then you're not lining up on values there, and you probably shouldn't be doing business with each other, in my opinion. And I think the other good, like, if you're wondering like who falls in that category of like partner versus vendor, like we hear a lot about that lately too, is like, when's the last time you met with them, did they ask you your opinion on something? Did they ask you to collaborate on something? Did they hear you out versus just coming in with a canned pitch on, hey, it's time for me to sell you something more. Here's the next thing we got to sell you, and pushing something down your throat you probably don't want. But like, are they actually collaborating with you, getting to know your business, getting to know what drives you, and providing introductions to other, good providers out in the world, like just helping with that thought process and that thought leadership. Because in my opinion, the money's going to come eventually. If you're a good partner and you're truly genuinely interested in what's making that company successful, and you're there for the long haul with them, the money's going to come eventually. Like, but you gotta solidify yourself, I think, in that lens. And if companies aren't asking for that type of stuff, I think that's a pretty telltale sign of to your point, what they're interested in. That's the, again, bottom line or shareholder value, whatever else it might be, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I think that's such an interesting, it's hard to quantify, I think, a lot of times, right? Is how collaborative are you? How relational are you? Because, it's really easy for one person in the organization to say that. It is the culture of that organization and the way it's actually like down to what is their ownership structure? Who are their investors? What is their, what are they looking for? What does success look like to them? The executive leadership, what are the metrics they're being measured against? And how do you kind of identify that? And, that may be different for different types of partners. Like maybe there's, a certain type of partner that, quite frankly, you just need to check mark a box. They just need to do this certain thing for you, and you just need to get it at the lowest price possible. And it just needs to be set it and forget it. There's probably a lot of those, right? But there's probably some really key important relationships that, to your point, like you should be trying to validate that by like, how often do I actually come to the table with them and sit down and collaborate? And then what comes of that? Like, does it turn into anything other than just some notes on somebody's computer that go up into thin air and then never get, heard from again? And
I think to that same point, like if the latter's true, like you're saying, then in that case, you probably should be doing more business with that company, because you're going to be able to get more integration and a deeper relationship through what they're delivering, right? So if, let's say you have a good meeting, you have all this thought process, the whiteboard, the bubble sessions, like all this stuff. And then from there, something actually comes of it, because odds are, at least from my experience, if I go meet with a credit union or a bank and they're telling me that they're having an issue and they're struggling through it, pretty much everyone else is probably gonna be in that same boat, right? And so from our lens, like, it makes it really easy to say, yeah, let's figure out something to help our customers here. But the truth piece though is, even if that's not the case, a lot of times we'll still end up doing it for them, because again, that's part of being that good partner and just moving in that right direction. But I don't know, it's something that I do feel like, man, until like generally we get past this bottleneck, it's going to be interesting to see what the next few years hold as far as when it comes to innovation and where banks and credit unions like end up going. But we'll
I
see.
mean, I personally will, get on the soapbox of, I would love to see us get to the point, and we're a ways away from this, but in this industry where it's so easy to just rip out technology.
Oh
right?
yeah.
I would absolutely love it. Like, and this is going to sound really unself-serving to me, but I would absolutely love it if you could just say, you know what? Like, I don't like my digital banking vendor. I'm done with them. I'm just going to go to somebody else's website and download theirs. And in 5 minutes, I'm on a new platform. Right?
Yeah.
Because when you get to that level, then it's a more competitive marketplace. You have to differentiate more on service and innovation, as opposed to, I got you so locked in because this thing is so stinking hard to freaking rip out and replace. To your point, you're going to sit there and you're going to whine and complain about me all day long. And then you're going to re-sign my renewal because you ain't going nowhere. Right. And I think that's why too, Scott, like I always feel like I have this, kind of light bulb moment anytime I get on this conversation with somebody on the podcast of, man, I don't envy a lot of times being in some of these folks' shoes at the financial institution, because it's a really difficult job. It's really hard to navigate all of these different complexities. And to your point, it's like you're trying to streamline things. You're trying to make things work together better. You're trying to negotiate pricing. You're trying to build relationships. You're trying to innovate and evolve. And you've got this dependency and that dependency. And, who's great today may not be great tomorrow. And it's a really hard thing to navigate. And especially when it's like everything is changing so fast around us, but it's really hard to change things for a lot of different reasons very quickly in our industry.
Yeah, I think pipe dream wise, like, to me, it all comes down to the core. Unfortunately, like, that's something you can't today, right? Maybe your point, like, you can go down and download a new core at some point in the future. I don't know, but like, you're so tied to that. And that's, where some of these bigger companies lie, but then they start getting into everything else. And you just can't get away. It's tough. But the funny thing is, like, I'm seeing right now with, I know we like overheard about AI. We don't want to talk about it anymore. Like, 'cause everything that we talk about all these days is AI, but it's like, you can literally, no code required, like, go out and develop your own app in minutes, right? You can go out and develop a website that used to cost tens of thousands of dollars in minutes. Like, it's insane and only going to get incredibly better. So like, I'm optimistic to a point to say, gosh, like, could there be a spot where we could get free and like not have all these different platforms? And I mean, yeah, we've shown in the past on just presentations that we've done too, of just the number of platforms that banks and credit unions use on a day-to-day basis too. I mean, it's in the hundreds and sometimes thousands of different systems that they have to do in order to run their job. My brother-in-law, he's a branch manager for a bank, and he said, he was shadowing one of his tellers, just kind of, and she had to use 16 different systems on a day-to-day basis to get her job done. Like different browsers, different applications. I'm like, holy smokes. He's like, yeah, no wonder when you try to change your address, like, it's such a cumbersome task, or you switch to a new digital banking product, or you do a new core system, or you do whatever, and all of a sudden 3 or 4 things are broken. It's because it's so archaic and old, and all the different ways that, these different platforms are connecting to each other. It's to your point, I don't envy anybody one bit that's in those shoes trying to make those decisions. It's just, for me, like, from a belief system, it's so counterintuitive to say, I don't love this company, but yeah, I'm going to keep paying them and keep signing up and keep going forward with them. But on the same note, like you're saying, they don't really have much of an option in some cases, and it's really brave and resource intensive to try to break away from it. So,
on that point though, man, I think we're naive to think that with the pace of just compute power and computing technology and network speeds, at the pace that it is accelerating, we are absolutely naive to think that anything we do is safe.
Oh, fair.
I think
Like say
anything
now.
and everything is pretty much for disruption at some point. I mean,
Oh yeah.
like you're saying, I mean, I can go, I'm a knucklehead, dude. Like I'm not a technologist,
Sure.
but even I can go use some of the new AI tools to like write code.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you get somebody
Yeah.
who actually knows what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's pretty crazy. If we think we're so safe that in whatever time frame, somebody couldn't write a program using AI to say, build a better digital banking platform than typhoons. So if you're not
Yeah, I
thinking
think
about that or leveraging those tools yourself to advance and innovate, I think you're in a sticky spot.
you'd be a fool to have a strategic direction or plan that's out more than a couple of years,
Yeah.
because it's totally going to be irrelevant by that point anyway. Like you got to work in the now, like, and it's interesting to see that. But yeah, I mean, any bit of stagnant strategy is going to be a tough spot here in a little bit.
Can I tell you a funny story? So this was even just a couple of years ago. We responded to an RFP for a financial institution.
Okay.
And as a part of that RFP, asked us for our 10-year roadmap. And I was like, I don't even know how to respond to this. So I went to our head of product and I was like, dude, we got this question. Like, what do you want me to put? And it was just hilarious. I genuinely wish I had this on recording because it's one of those things I would actually go back and watch again later. He went on the most epic rant of like, this is ridiculous. If any tech company has a 10-year roadmap, it's because it'll take them 10 years to actually build anything. They don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. Like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But I think the point is really valid, right? Especially at the pace at which technology evolves. I mean, you think back to 3 years ago, right? And how little the mainstream was using AI to today. It's completely night and day different. Now, what's interesting is that for a lot of people, they think that like AI came about overnight when they started to see like Chat GPT in the wild.
Yeah.
That was kind of like when AI arrived.
Yeah.
But this stuff's been around for a long time. It's been getting worked on, but it just kind of reached that critical mass. And then all of a sudden it just accelerates like crazy. And so to your point, it's like, we don't know what's going to happen in a year, 2 years, 3 years. You have to be building strategies prepared for change, not saying this is exactly what I'm going to do 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now. It ain't going to work. Not in today's.
What's even crazy is like, we feel like AI is going fast now though. Like wait 6 months. Like this time next year, AI is going to be a totally different animal than it is right now. That's going to be more mind blowing in my opinion. So like, get your popcorn, buckle up. I think it's going to be interesting.
Well, and kind of, one of the things you were talking about earlier, I wanted to come back to, Scott, was, talking about just the pluses and minuses too of all of a sudden, one company providing so many different services.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes that gets a bad rap, but I think there's also a really positive to that.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And so we're talking about like the advent of AI, and maybe this company that you really love working with, wasn't doing anything in this space, but because they had something similar that now, because of this new advent of technology, could help them to do a totally new vertical for you and solve real cool problems for you with existing technology or existing things you're getting from them. That's very different than just the other example you gave of just gobbling up competitors and saying, well, now I offer everything. It all kind of stinks and none of it works well together. That's an example of one company doing 10 things wrong, but you can also get an example of one company doing 10 things really, really well because they were thoughtful about collaborating with their customers and saying, oh, you know what? This wasn't on our roadmap to do. This isn't a product that we offer, but you know what? Actually, this is a problem we can solve for you. This makes a lot of sense. Right?
Mm-hmm. I think interesting thought we actually talked about this with our customers at our last tech summit was obviously there's been a ton of like ATM fraud lately.
Mm.
And part of that struggle is actually catching these bad guys. So let's say you get a guy that shows up to an ATM and they're selling a skimming device at XYZ credit union. Every single time you just follow that trend, it goes right up the interstate or down the interstate. Like it's without fail, right? So we're like, man, how cool would it could be is if we could then proactively notify people like, okay, like if someone just got hit here, you're 20 miles north, buckle up, they're probably coming tomorrow, right? But like, again, different systems make that really difficult, right? But to your point, like, okay, if we've got that common user group here and we can see that, we can start sharing that data more effectively, we can stop things from happening, right? And so, yeah, CSG is one where we talk about bundle and save all the time. I feel like I'm Flo from Progressive. Like every time I'm talking to a customer, right? It's like, yeah, there's some things that we absolutely say, go all in with CSG on things. But to your point, like it's how you go about doing it and the reason behind it is well beyond just the dollars and cents. And because you have to, you feel like you don't have any other option to go anywhere else. Our hope is that the integration piece is critical. Like once you get multiple pieces together, the ability to then tie that all together and make things, work for your benefit, for not only your customers, but also for your employees is huge from our perspective, right? It's just saying, we want to make your lives easier. We want to make your customers' lives easier. Let's figure out the technology and the partnerships with others to make that happen, right? So integration for us is a big piece. And I think sometimes, when you have a lot of that bundled in together, it makes it a heck of a lot easier versus trying to coordinate up sometimes with other bigger companies to get them to pay attention, to hang out with you and not charge you $10,000 for a phone call.
No shots fired. When you were talking about that, I was thinking about that comes down to like, what is your thought process? What's your starting point, right? And if your starting point is, I have a solution looking for a problem, right? Like I saw this cool new thing this company offers at a conference. Like, how can I use it to make my business more, efficient? Or how can I use it to get more members? Or how can I drive more deposits using that thing that I saw that was really cool? Versus saying, I have a thing that I'm trying to accomplish. What are the ways that I could accomplish that? Because sometimes there's more than one way to get there. But if you start from the get there, you're never going to see those other things or the other problems that you could have solved. Right. And, you gave me a really fascinating example when we were talking, I think at a conference recently. Right. And I don't even know what you intended to tell me about this, but it kind of always stuck with me. And I wanted to talk to you more about it when we recorded this podcast, okay. But you were saying something about you were talking to a customer and they were trying to bring in this super sophisticated system to heat map track where people were going in their branches and understand lobby traffic and all of this. And they're looking at this exponentially expensive system to do all of these things and all these different sensors. And you were like, we have cameras that we use for security. They track all of that. You could just add heat mapping to the cameras and you'd have that. Right. And so that's an example of they found a solution without thinking about, well, what am I actually trying to accomplish? Oh, it's that. Right. Are there other ways to accomplish that with even existing technology so that I can innovate faster?
Yeah, it's an interesting sign on our side. It frustrates me to no end too, but the number of customers that use analytics at CSG is scarily low. And again, the interesting part is it doesn't cost a ton of money. It's, in fact, in a lot of cases, it's free because it comes, with the systems. But I think to your point, they're lacking the use cases behind this. So yeah, that was one where they're trying to track customer sentiment. Are people happy when they come into our branch? And they want even to get to a spot where they can actually hear voice and can they detect demeanor in some of those pieces too? And so, yeah, that's kind of where our light bulbs are. And well, we're not doing that today, but all we got to do is flip this one switch. Again, the cost is going to be this much compared to this much. And there's no need to introduce any new vendors, any new products, any new anything, and you're good to go. It's crazy. We had the same thing with a customer that was dealing with hook and chain attacks. So this is where criminals back up with a tractor or a stolen truck and yank the ATM off the island and just for screw card skimming, right? That's for amateurs. I don't want to have to take the card data and then make cards and then steal people's money. I'm just going to take the money out of the machine. That's
just going to take my tractor downtown.
Right. You know what? Good job, guys. Genius mode. I improve. Yes, applaud your thinking. So yeah, so they're stealing tractors from across the street. They're stealing cars, wrapping a chain around it and just yanking these ATMs off, grabbing the cash and being done. So we had a customer in California come to us and say, hey, I don't want to, there's other options in the marketplace that could spend $10,000, $20,000 of just ugly things to make this not happen again. And we kind of said, well, what if, right? Like, what if we just used a camera and some analytics and a sensor and maybe a speaker, a couple $100 in IoT devices and fix it? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'd rather do that than spend 10 grand on this. It's like, okay. So like, but again, it's the existing technology, existing vendor, just thinking to your point about how we can solve this versus trying to go outside of that. And yeah, it's interesting. I think sometimes when you can leverage to the fullest extent what you have, I would bet if you were to go back in and look at your current platforms, how much of it you're using of its full capabilities is probably pretty small. It probably 10, 15% of what you do.
That is such a challenge, man. I mean, like, I'll fall on the sword. I think, we could do a better job of this too. It's like, how many times do prospective customers to see kind of the demo of the latest and greatest? And current customers, they themselves, and we, the vendors, just think, well, you're good. You're on the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier. Like, you have to have those relationships and those conversations where you're really kind of coming to the table and collaborating. You also have to tell each other what you're working on to even know, right? Like, if that customer had never come to you and even had the conversation because they were like, hey, look, CSG doesn't do like marketing analytics for heat mapping of traffic in our branches. So why would we ever talk to them about, right? That conversation never happens. Then the great idea never comes up. But if you've developed really great relationships with your partners where you're able to just have a conversation, you're like, Scott, so we've got a couple of strategic initiatives we're working on this year. Like, one of them is this kind of cool project that we're doing and, heat mapping and all of this. Then you start to have conversations outside the norm. And that is where then all of a sudden you're like, my company that was securing your ATM is also now doing, marketing analytics for heat tracking of your, and that totally sounds out in left field, but actually it makes a lot of sense, right?
Sure.
And I think that's where you can actually like find the value or find the ability to kind of move faster, given all the challenges we've had.
Yeah. No, and I'm with you. Like, shame on us too. Like, I'll fall on the sword absolutely too for that reason that people don't use analytics. I think it's our fault because we haven't helped them figure out how and what to use. Like, every demo we do of our system always shows analytics, but then we go and install something without it. It's like, well, what the heck? Why not? Well, it's because we didn't have marketing in the call, right? We didn't have retail on the call. We didn't have ops on the call. We're always talking to the security person, right? And they got their view of what they want to have done here. And then on the same side, it's like, okay, well, let's say you are doing just simple like line crossing. I just want to know how many people come into my branch and out of my branch every day. Well, what are you going to do with that data?
Yeah.
Like, without a good conversation, you're not going to know. And so until you know that, there's no reason to have the data because then no one knows what to do with it. So let's not even turn the analytic on. Fair, right? So like, that's on us, in my opinion, to say, let's help you figure this out because the technology is there, right? In some cases, you're already paying for it. It's like, let's use it. And so, yeah, it's part of that collaboration there for sure of just saying, hey, let's think outside the box. Let's get more people involved. Let's get that think tank going. Because yeah, odds are there's technology sitting there on the sideline that other people within that organization could be using and they just don't know about it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said too, like, man, I don't envy some of the folks, trying to piece all this stuff together from inside the four walls of, a credit union or a community bank, because there's so many of these different systems. And as one person kind of trying to see the whole picture, it's really hard to know, like, oh, hot dang, I did not actually know that our, security camera system that, this person bought to make sure nobody smashes a window after we've closed at 5:30 and no one's here. Also feed my marketing team with data on how many people enter the branch at what times with what sentiment, right? And tag it to what transactions did they do while they were there, and then feed that into their marketing engine. Like, that's a stretch sometimes when we're trying to fry some bigger fish.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting for sure. I think, but sometimes I'm curious too, like on the relationship side of sometimes banks, credit unions make siloed decisions. I mean, just so the same do we. I mean, any company does that, right? It's like, how do you know when to raise the flag and say, let's think about bringing in this other department. I think that kind of goes in tune with, are you aware of the overall company initiatives outside of your department? And if you are, then that flag would go off, right? If I'm the security manager and say, hey, yeah, this is something that my ops team could use, but you don't know that unless you know kind of the overarching plan of what are we trying to solve for in the branch and where's my piece of that puzzle. So yeah, it's the same frustrating but fun innovation piece that we spin in all the time of just figuring out how we can help the customers, but sometimes it's helping ourselves from ourselves and helping them from themselves too,
Right.
and working on it together.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever for a company where you had, perfect visibility across
Oh,
every initiative. Because at the same time, like it's always that balance of having the right people involved so that you do get that stuff, but you also don't want too many hands in cookie jars because that can create a whole nother can of worms where
yeah.
it's like perfect case in point, right? Let's just keep going down this thread. Let's say I don't know who would be the buyer at like a credit union for like the security cameras.
Like a facilities manager, security
Yeah.
officer,
So,
someone else.
so they're the person that's looking at, okay, it's time for us to upgrade our camera system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a very specific set of things that they're trying to accomplish for that. They've got a budget for that. At what point would they want to say, we should pull Mark this too? They should have a hand in helping me pick our security, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got the marketing person that's like, well, no, but I want the higher resolution one. And I want the one that, that one's in beige. Like, no, that clashes with our colors. I want black ones. Right. And now it takes you 18 months to pick out new cameras. You've lost all this time. But at the same time, if you didn't involve them, you may never have known that they would have found really valuable insights into the data that those cameras could feed them about traffic coming into the branch. So it's like, it's a total, how do you decide, right? And that's probably going to be different at every organization.
Yeah. Well, I think back to our initial conversation too, I think that's when you find out, is the vendor or the partner you're working with actually in it for the money, or are they in it for the right reason too? Like, I'm totally fine with it taking longer to get the right solution in place than just to get something done quickly and get the sell off the street and move on. Cool thing about that though, is you could, with talking security specifically, you can kind of do that, right? You can get the cameras in place, get them doing what they're normally doing. Is like, hey, yeah, if there's a robbery, I got the footage to show it, and that's good, right? But then can we have the follow-up conversation later? Say, hey, by the way, software only update, boom, and we can start helping out the retail team. Cool, let's have a conversation and figure it out. But yeah, it's, again, there's no silver bullet to it, unfortunately, I don't think either. But it is interesting. I would think, if I would just, again, you probably know who your core partners are, right? There's probably just a handful of them. I would challenge everyone to be meeting with them as regularly as it makes sense to really kind of unveil and bring, even if you think it's, oh, this isn't a security thing or this isn't a digital banking thing, I want to talk to you guys about X, Y, or Z, because odds are like you're going to know somebody in the industry that does it if you don't do it. And then you're getting good, honest feedback from people that you trust versus just trying to find it on Google or trying to find it at a trade show or just organically getting it out of some random place.
That's funny. That's actually, I use her. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I've referenced her on the podcast, Scott, I'd be retired at this point. But what is funny is actually Scott did introduce me to this FI. So I guess I do have to recount my words in the intro. Scott introduced me to Tracy Miller from Pioneer.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think is so incredibly special about her. She's so good at being really, really thoughtful about, I bet you anything. Like, we've never actually checked this, Scott. I think it'd be really funny too sometime. I bet you anything she has the exact same conversation with you and then with me, or vice versa.
Probably.
About these are the
You're not
strategic
wrong.
things that I'm trying to accomplish and whatever. And she doesn't put a filter on it and say, well, I'm going to talk to Scott about these things. And I'm going to talk to Josh about these things. She's like, I'm going to talk to all of my, key partners about everything I'm trying to solve. And then collectively, they as an ecosystem need to help support me in finding the ways to solve the problems I'm trying to solve. Right.
And
I
they're
think
probably
she's
gonna have the same
really good
answers.
at that. What's that?
That's the thing. We're probably gonna have the same answers too, is probably the thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you're, let's say, either one of us do core banking, right? But if she says, hey, I'm thinking about switching out my core, I'm going to go to RFP. She's going to call me and say, hey, Scott, what are you hearing? Right? They're going to call you. Hey, Josh, what are you hearing? Right? And we're probably going to say the same thing. Hey, these 2 or 3, I've been hearing really good things about their conversions. I've been really hearing good things about their implementations. I've been really good things about their, platform and innovations or whatever. And she's probably going to deduce the same thing naturally just by talking to 2 or 3 different companies that have nothing to do with it. We've got no skin in the game on what course she ends up picking, right? But what happens is that's a relationship that we've developed. And eventually there's probably somebody say, hey, yeah, actually, Tracy, did you know that we do that? Oh, I had no idea. Cool. Let's talk about it. And off we go. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I would probably say it's maybe 1 in 100 times that I talk to her where I'm like, oh, I actually, like, I can sell you something. It's usually like, oh, I have a friend. Oh, I have, I heard about this. Oh, actually, you know what? We have another customer who did that. I should connect you with them. You should have a conversation with them. And it does. It takes time and you really have to be genuine about it. But I do think that that's one of the superpowers that we can have is, I know it sounds silly and this is where we're getting the kumbaya-ness of Scott and I chatting for an hour, but like superpower of our industry is collaboration, right? And I think the people that are really succeeding are the ones that are putting that at the forefront. And they're just saying like, I'm going to find the key people that I really trust and respect. And I'm going to build a strong network out of that. And I'm going to have, my strategic conversations with each of them and collectively gather that feedback and kind of assess the entire ecosystem to see how can I, the best of my ability within my legacy contracts, within the stuff I've already got, vendors I've already got, like how can I make the most of what?
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, one thing I'm challenging my team with this year too is like help customers build out, and it may be a multi-year plan, unfortunately, because of how contract dates line up, but like figure out that multi-year strategy plan with the customer, right? Like sit down with them and say, okay, hey, like here's some certain things that you're struggling with, prioritize them, look at contract end dates, and then figure out how we can slowly help them dig out of it, because it is possible. But what makes it impossible is when we keep re-upping and redoing the same thing we know we shouldn't be doing, right? And then you're just inevitably pushing it out indefinitely, right? Versus like, let's slowly chip away at that iceberg and eventually get there. And it may, again, likely going to take several years to do, unless you got super deep pockets that can just pay all the early penalty fees, which I don't know of any credit union or bank that can do that today. Then yes, let's build a plan around it and slowly, methodically, and intentionally do it. I think you get out pretty quick.
So you gave one example. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about the stuff that, like I said, you're my go-to expert.
Okay.
Man, I tell you what, whether it's digital or physical, I hate to say it, but I feel like it's in the top 3 every single conversation I have with a community FI right now. They're talking about losing money. And it's in one way or another. And man, I don't know about you, but it's just like one of my biggest pet peeves is like just taking somebody, something from somebody who worked hard. It just like rubs me the wrong way. So I'm like really bitter about this for a lot of reasons, but it's just, I feel like our poor FIs, man, are just getting hit in every facet, all sorts of different fraud and crimes. And like you said, I mean, there's everything from the super sophisticated stuff to just some redneck grabbing a freaking tractor and hot wiring it from John Deere next door to your branch, driving it across the street, lassoing your friggin' ATM and dragging it down the street. Like, I'm like, man, you're sitting here trying to like think about super sophisticated fraud modeling tools. You think you've solved it all. And then some jackwagon steals a John Deere, rips your ATM out, and you got a bunch of money. Like, it hit on a lot of different levels. What kinds of stuff are you seeing?
I'm seeing a potential workforce that could be, if they were contributing to society, could be really helpful.
like you could use that tractor to go like build some homes for Habitat for Humanity or something. Like, come
on. Or like these guys, they're good, right? They're sophisticated at these attacks, and they're just not using it to build society. That's the sucky part, right? But that's my other soapbox is like, dang it, like we need these people to be well intended, and that life could be different. Man, I don't know. The one that hits home really crazy lately is, go ahead.
No, you would find this entertaining. So, Stiba, our CEO, is very intelligent. So you don't really get one by him. And somebody tried calling him and frauding him recently. And he was just
Oh,
in
wow.
one of those spicy moods. And so he just kind of like ran with it for a while and played with them. Long story short, Scott,
Mhm.
he literally got to the like end of the chain where he was talking to the whatever, like owner of this fraud ring, like the top dog. Right.
Mm.
And finally it came out that Siba like wasn't going to fall for this. Right.
Right.
And so then Siba gets all spicy with the guy and it's like, to your point, it's like, dude, this is so elaborate what you've concocted. Like this, you're using very
Congratulations.
sophisticated technology. He's like, I'm really impressed. Like, why aren't you doing good with this? Like, you're risking getting thrown in prison forever. You're very intelligent. Like, do something productive with it. And you know what the guy told him, Scott? The guy was like, look, dude, here's the deal. He's like, I can't remember what it was, but it was gross. It was something like he was saying he makes like $100,000 a week on this scam.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I have like 10 people working for me. I pay them pennies. And he's like,
Yep.
I am raking it in. And I'm a small fish in the fraud pond. He's like, they're never going to come for me. He's like, so no, screw you, dude. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Thanks for trying to get me to be a good person. He's like, I'm not going to. I make too much money. This is way too great of a lifestyle. Bye. And hangs up on him. And Siba was just like,
Good human. Someone track that call.
yeah. It's just,
Yeah.
sorry. Continue. You were saying one of the ones you're seeing a lot of is.
I don't know. There's a lot. I think the frustrating part on that same note is like, so we caught this guy. He was doing some skimming at a credit union up in the Pacific Northwest. Actually caught him though. So like 9 times out of 10, you just catch the skimming device later and you throw it away or you give it to the FBI or whatever, and it's done deal. But you never find the people that did it, right? This time, like we actually stayed up, like we watched, caught the guy. I got a video of like the guy comes back. He's in the middle of like removing the skimming device. The police are chasing him through. They catch him. They tackle him in the parking lot. Like it's this whole like movie scene, right? We're high fiving like, oh my gosh, we finally got this. Let's go. And sure enough, we can't hold him. Like, oh, well, there's not enough evidence, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my gosh. So finally, like, we kind of keep going. And Levi was working with the Homeland Security on this. They finally catch the guy coming back in from Canada through like New York, I guess. And like through facial rec, they ended up catching him and actually apprehending him. Got to a point where we actually got to be able to extradite him back to Washington or Oregon. But like, you had to like go through some crazy hoops in order to prove that he was doing financial crimes in order to stick him with anything. Otherwise, it's like literally a slap on the wrist and you're on your way. And the guy's back next week taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from these banks and credit unions. Like, so to me, like, I think not to get political on you, but like it's totally a politics issue. Like you've got to have these people like actually thrown in prison, like for a long time for doing this crap. Otherwise, to your point, there's zero risk. Like I can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, and worst case, I get a misdemeanor on my record, and don't even live in the United States anyways, and so I'm just gonna go back and come back and do it somewhere other way. And it's just like, so to me, I think that's the biggest problem, unfortunately, because there's so many. To your point, whether it's phone fraud, ATM fraud, actually robbing banks, still like whatever it is, check fraud, you name it. Like there's so many avenues to rip off banks and credit unions today, and there's no real consequences or really good ways to actually catch them in doing it and prove it. That's just going to get worse, to your point. Like, I don't know. So yeah, we're seeing it all over the board. The latest, which is super sick actually, is we're seeing criminals actually target our technicians. Like we had so many people last year, which is scary, like guns pulled on them, like almost get shot, like, and over, opening up the ATM, like they'll purposely go in there, jam an ATM, cause a service call, wait for our guy to show up, open the ATM up, and then grab all the cash from him and run away. It's like, geez, man, like, to me, like it's shocker sometimes that customers, again, not self-serving, but still have ATMs because it's such a liability for everybody, even our side. Like it's so bad. So I don't know, like the number of fraud and ways to commit fraud against banks and credit unions today is very long list, right? Unfortunately, our goal and our hope is, again, like why we do what we do is to try to find innovative ways to stop that cat and mouse game once and for all, and like get ahead of them through layered security approaches, through other ways so that they don't ever mess with our customers because they know it's not going to work out.
And
good thing is, like I said, we've had some really cool success stories where we've done this, and it's really exciting. And I think where we're going is even more exciting because there's some really cool ways where we can now do some crowdsourcing of the information and actually work with other FIs instead of just having it siloed. And I honestly don't think we're too far off with that because of some of the technology that's evolving to where we're going to be able to do some pretty cool things here this year, I'm hoping. So,
That makes me think of a saying that Siva says all the time too. And he'll be the first one to tell you, like, he hates that this is what he has to say, right? Like, we wish the answer was just solve it and nobody was a bad person and didn't steal. But, uses the analogy of, if you're running from a bear, you don't really have to outrun a bear. You just have to outrun a friend.
you're right.
And so you can just be, if the fraudsters go to you and you're kind of a pain in the butt to steal from, they're going to go look for somebody that's easier, right? They're going to look for an easier target. And as horrible as that sounds, like that, I think that is a part of proper approach is just, to your point, like we're never going to stay 100% ahead of them, right? We have to be right 100% of the time. All they have to do is get lucky once. And when we deal with humans, human error and just being human, right? We're never going to be perfect. So, we're never going to be 100%.
But optimistically, though, I would say, though, is like if the United States in general got ahead of the curve, because we're so far behind Europe and Asia and like those other continents, like if we can legit do a good job here, they'll go elsewhere, meaning out of the country. Like, again, I hate to say, I don't want anyone getting fraud, right? But like at least
exactly.
Like go do fraud in another country, but it's the reality. Like there's no penalties really here, and the technology is so far behind. It's an easy pick.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's scary to me, Scott, is again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I hate to keep bringing up AI, but the advancements in technology, again, we're crazy to think that the fraudsters aren't using this stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Right. And they're getting even more and more
easily.
sophisticated. What's that?
Yeah. I said, I could be Josh DeTar tomorrow very easily.
Yeah.
Could clone your face, your voice, your mannerisms. I can make it happen. Like
it's terrifying.
Wild.
Yeah. And so again, like it's getting that much more difficult to be right 100% of the time. But it's what can we do to make, shore up all of our defenses, put as much of a moat around us as possible.
Layers.
Where they're like, hey, look, like I tried to steal an ATM. That didn't work. I tried to card skim them. That didn't work. I tried to do account takeover fraud in digital banking. That didn't work. Honestly, like I'm not trying a fourth time. There's somebody easier to go steal from. I'm going over there.
Move on.
Right.
Yes.
And again, like I said, I agree with you. Like I hate to send it somewhere else, but at least if I can protect what I can protect and the people that I can protect, like I guess that's a win, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta take a little wins. I mean, to point, like that's why we got so excited about catching that one guy. It's like, yes, like validation that at least all these efforts, right? Even if we're not catching everything, catching one is better than nothing, and we're moving on. The cool thing about this is if you talk to our director of our network operations center, I mean, we're getting some pretty cool, consistent wins over and over. So like to us, it's like, it's exciting that
feels,
hey, the ideas are working, things are paying off. We're gonna start building on those blocks, building on the momentum and keep moving at it because it's working. So yeah.
Another mutual friend of ours, Mr. Jason Thomas, and I have a text string of one of our favorite things to do is when we get those like fraudsters is seeing who can lead them on the longest.
Oh yeah.
It is with that mindset of like, maybe I can annoy them enough that they'll give up for the day and not get somebody that actually would have fallen for it.
Right. That's fair.
What I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so yeah, we have this whole thing where we try and lead them on as long as we can so that they don't have time to go get somebody who actually would have fallen for it. And
I'm glad I'm not the only one that
their
does
life
that.
choices.
It drives my wife crazy. She's like, why are you even talking to them? I'm like, because it's so fun sometimes to like mess with them.
It's like, to your point, like it's a little satisfying to get a win against these jerks. So, I don't know.
Drives her crazy.
Now this actually opens up, before we started recording, you said one of the things you wanted to talk to me about was payments. And you're like, I don't know how we even weave this into the conversation. But what's funny is you gave me exactly the end of this. Is I think one of the problems too that we face is that there are so many ways to access, move, and leverage money in the US. And that's a part of the problem is like if you have, here, bear with me here. So my wife and I, for whatever reason, like we got on the train of rewatching Game of Thrones recently.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so
Okay.
we're going back through and watching Game of Thrones. And I just made this joke the other night because they're like storming this city and they go into like the little, like water drainage gate and they break in through that. There's no guards and everything. And I was like, why do you idiots all have these doors?
Everyone knows.
Just stop. Like everyone knows you all have this like service access gate that's unprotected. Like just don't have those. You know what I mean? Or if you have one, at least put a guard on it. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
But when you've got 100 doors to guard, it's a lot harder than guarding one door.
Yeah.
And when we've got ATMs for cash, when we've got checks and check fraud, when you've got debit cards for skimming and for just stealing the number because you're a server at a restaurant and you grab it, you start doing some online shopping, to, hey, I'm going to log into your digital banking account as you and start siphoning money out and ACHing myself, right? We have so many different ways to move money. We also have so many different ways to steal.
Yeah.
And so as we start
systems
to
that don't talk to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And systems that don't talk to each other, right? Like, perfect case in point. Like, let's say we have somebody who we know has a tractor and ripped ATMs out of walls at credit unions around the street. Well, if we know that that person is trying to log into digital banking, I don't know. That's probably a pretty good person to block. They're probably a pretty sucky person.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But we don't have that intel. We don't have that data sheet. And so as we start to get more,
yeah, go ahead.
No. Yeah. As we start to get systems that are more interconnected and as we start to pare down potentially the number of different ways to move money and transact, that's actually a good thing from a security.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I was gonna say we're starting to do some facial rec now, which I know facial rec sometimes is like this bad word of people think like Big Brother and whatnot. But without actually saying like, hey, that's Scott Fieber at the ATM, we can just say, hey, this is a known bad guy. That's it. Like just almost like bad guy detector. You just upload the images and then again, to your say, detect that. So if I see that person at the ATM, let's just not allow them to take cash out, right? Or for 2 point, I see that person try to log into the app, not allow it, right? Or like, I don't know, there's some fun things I think with biometrics that start to kind of give that same way of, but again, got to have the data in the same spot and not have it disparate everywhere. So yeah, I think you're on something for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it is, we have so many different ways to move money and a lot of our traditional systems move on legacy technology and move really slow.
Yeah.
And again, go back to our medieval analogies here, right? Like it's a lot harder to steal the gold when it's in the vault in the castle.
Sure.
But if you're moving it from one castle to another, it's a lot easier to steal it in transit.
Prime pickings. Yeah.
Especially if it's out on the road for a couple of days, right? It's a lot easier to steal money when it's kind of in transit. Yeah, there's a Vin Diesel's coming in at some point.
Yes.
But it's a lot easier to steal this stuff when it's in transit. And it's like, hey, sent the money. Now we need to go validate with this system. Then we need to go check this system. And then it's going to take 2 days. And then it's going to post to this system. And then we'll take it out of this system. During that time period, there's a lot of opportunity for somebody to monkey with that system or to alter records, right? Whereas as we start to see the advent of true instant payments and money movement, where it moves and settles in seconds, again, you're just closing down some of these doors for people to actually steal.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that, I guess, challenge the question back, like, is there any way to do that properly today that you can think of? Or is it all, I mean, none of the current systems that I can think of are doing anything about that, right? Are they?
I mean, not at a tied together level is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But I think it's kind of grateful I don't have a ton of money because I feel like I would lose it so fast. I would do something stupid that would get lost so quickly. Like, well, that was fun while it lasted.
Isn't that the truth? It goes back to like the guy, like, I'm the small fish in the pond. And I'm like, I'm less concerned that somebody's going to steal from me, I guess, because I don't have millions of dollars.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Scott, one of the other things we're going to take a massive left turn. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about before I turn you loose on your night is, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the nonprofit that you and your wife have started. And again, like, this industry is one that it always surprises, and I think in a good way, in the way that people respond and really rally together and build community and do good. So I just think this would be a great opportunity for you to talk about a different way that if people are interested in this type of cause, they could do some good. So if you're open to it, I'd love for you to share a little.
Yeah. So the nonprofit's called Unlimit Aid. Unlimit-Aid is probably, I didn't consult any marketing firm on that name. So it's not the best, but it's actually funny when you try hearing people say it in Spanish, because what we do is a lot of the stuff is in Central America. No one can say it down there either. So we probably need to rebrand at some point, but yeah. So out of high school, I went down and lived in El Salvador for 2 years and just grew to love the people down there, but also saw a lot of the struggles. For people that don't know, like the MS-13 gang, which is like one of the, I think last I heard, the biggest gang in the world, started out of El Salvador. El Salvador had some crazy like civil war issues in like the 80s, 90s. Have since come a long ways in clearing all that up, but the gang presence down there is still insane. And it's kind of spread through Guatemala, Mexico, even the United States is a big deal. And so when I was down there, like, I've seen some heartbreaking things with just kids that never had a fighting chance at success. Like, all they've known was, and the crazy thing is, like, the public school system down there is a prime recruiting ground for gangs. And so, like, it's so sad to see it. And so, yeah, I mean, probably about 8 years ago or so, my wife and I finally started this nonprofit to say, hey, let's find, this is part of me, is I always go big when I go, like, I should probably learn better. But like, my wife grounded me. She's like, well, let's just find one kid to help. And I'm like, okay. We went down there, interviewed some schools, interviewed some families and kids, obviously couldn't say no to any of them. So like, we started out with like 7 kids our first year, of kids that are primed to go down a wrong path unless we step in. And so we stepped in, and our main goal was to get them out of the public school system and into a private education to where they can kind of see that there's different life outside of gangs and drugs and other things. A lot of these kids are just at-risk kids that, have broken homes or a struggle of some sort that we like to help them out with. But it was pretty gratifying to see, like, last year was our first year that we graduated 4 students from high school, which is super satisfying. There's been some heartbreaking things along the way too. We haven't helped everybody that we wanted to. But yeah, this last November, months ago, we took 16 kids from the United States down and did some service projects and worked and kind of celebrated their school year. Their school year actually goes from late January to late October. It's like their summer break is November, December. So we went down and kind of did an end of year celebration with all the kids, and then did some service work and kind of helped the kids from here network and grow between the different countries and stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But so yeah, this year we're growing even bigger. We have the biggest class ever this year. And so it's fun to see that. And it's fun to think, I think, not to put like Christ and God into this, but I will, because I'm a big believer. But it's crazy to see how, like, we just say yes and worry about the finances later. Like, everything we do is through donations and through just self-funding that my wife and I do. And every year I get that bill for tuition and for books and uniforms and whatever else these kids need to do their thing for the year. And I'm like, oh crap, there's no way we're going to be able to figure this out. And then I always get a phone call from someone saying, hey, Scott, I saw, can we donate? And it's always the amount of money we need. Like, it's just a miracle every single year. And it's so cool to see it. So yes, my goal in life is to retire as soon as possible, although I love banking, but to go out and just help these kids full time and keep the cause going beyond what we're doing now. But it's cool. So yeah, if anyone's interested in learning about these kids and getting to know more of them and being part of it, we're happy to help bring you along, either on a trip or help financially, or just, we actually do monthly Zoom calls with them too, just kind of help give these kids perspective too. So if you have any experience and you just want to share the experience with kids, like, there's so much more than just donating money to the cause that can be such a huge help for the kids. So, but yeah, thanks for asking. It's definitely, obviously it's our heart there. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, it's needed. And We talk
Yeah.
about trying to solve challenges
It's
here.
man, it's rewarding well beyond anything else that we do, just to kind of see the impact you have on these kids. Because again, I know exactly where they'd be had we not stepped in, like 100%, because I've seen it, and it's pretty cool, pretty cool. So
Great. Well, let us know how we can help. Thank you for taking a minute to share. That leads me to two final questions for you. So one, just where do you go to get information about what's happening in the industry? Keeps you up to date.
I wish I was bigger on reading articles and things like that, but I'm not. So honestly, a lot of what I hear is honestly from customers and peers and contacts like you. Just you kind of hear about it very quickly, like, oh, and so got acquired, or hey, this company's came about, or hey, this just happened. So it's honestly just like through my peer network of hearing things, which is probably the good source of truth, though, to be honest. Like you gotta go through the BS sometimes that you read online. But so yeah, that's not a good answer. Probably. I definitely don't say like I subscribe to this channel or that channel or this, whatever. But I do subscribe to your podcast now, though, after the invite. So this will be my new source of information. Yes.
Well, and then if people want to connect with you either on the work front and want to talk about, anything that they're seeing in terms of, some needs they have for their financial institution, or if they just want to connect with you on a personal level, learn a little bit more about what you're doing with the nonprofit, how can people get a hold of you, connect with you, and how can they learn more about Cook Solutions Group?
I mean, obviously reach out to me personally. I'm happy to help on any level there. Our website's a good spot from all things CSG. Our newsletter is quirky and fun at the same time. Like it's funny, the analytics we get on our newsletter, everyone likes our beer blog, and it's at the very bottom because of that reason. You have to go through all of our CSGs to get to the beer blog. But my cell phone's out there. I'll give it to anybody that wants it. 801-580-1089. You can call me, text me, whatever. And we're there to help. So but yeah, CSG, like I said, that's one of the reasons why I work at CSG and not some of these other companies, is like, I feel CSG is in line with me morally, right? Like I've seen Brian, our owner, do the right thing over and over and over again for customers, even though it doesn't make any sense financially for us to do it. And so that aligns with me 100%. And that's why I'm here and why I'll be here for a very long time because of that. So yeah, so if you're looking for, a company that wants to do the right thing by you and collaborate with you, and, we're one of those good guys.
I agree. Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come hang out and chat. It's always good to see you. It's always good to talk. But thanks for doing on a recording, and thanks for being on the Digital Banking Podcast, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me. Definitely need to catch up. I'll wear the gold jacket next time, I promise.
Please do. All right, man. I'll see you later.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Banking Podcast powered by Typhon. Find more episodes on digitalbankingpodcast.com or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.